implications of the illegal biological COVID lab discovered in Reedley in March of this year, it's first important to remember what this community, our nation, the world went through for the last 2.5, 3 years. The COVID pandemic went on for nearly 3 years. It's commonly believed that COVID resulted from a lab leak out of the Wuhan lab in China. Worldwide, there are 769 million cases of COVID that resulted in nearly 7 million deaths. In the United States, there have been 107 million cases and nearly 1.2 million deaths. In California, there have been 103,000 deaths. China's COVID-19 virus resulted in the destruction of lives, livelihoods, the economy, and business. Children were stupidly locked out of school for 2 years and were destroyed academically, socially, and emotionally. People lost their freedoms, were forced to get experimental vaccines, to wear ineffective masks, and were lied to over and over by the CDC and government officials. Any information that challenged the lies and the tyrannical mandates that were suppressed by social media. And we had officials locally that were silent and complicit with all the unconstitutional and destructive government orders. And now they're silent again. So what do we know about this lab in Reedley? Well, on March 3rd, the Reedley code enforcement officers investigated the site after seeing an illegally attached garden hose. On March 16th, the warehouse was inspected, and it was discovered that the lab was producing COVID-19. There is blood, tissue, bodily fluid samples, and thousands of vials with fluids that are not labeled. They also found 900 mice, 200 mice that were dead. On March 16th, the representative from the company, Prestige Biotech, potentially a China national, informed investigators, quote, "These mice were genetically engineered to catch and carry the COVID-19 virus," end quote. Prestige Biotech, that company, is licensed in Nevada, not California. One address listed for this company is a vacant building in Las Vegas. Substack reports that other addresses related to this company appear to be in China, though this can't be verified at this time. And they also report that, quote, "Thousands of packages were found as well, many with shipping labels from China," end quote. On May 4th, the CDC inspected the lab and found infectious agents that were both bacterial and viral in nature. Some of these include hepatitis B and C, rubella, malaria, E. coli, and pneumonia. Fresno Superior Court documents indicate that mice were involved in these experiments with COVID-19. The lab apparently illegally disposed of medical waste, and it's believed it went to the landfill. This can't be confirmed because the operators of the lab have not been forthcoming. Now, questions that must be answered and the public has a right to know. One, is this company from China or is it sponsored by the Chinese government? What was the purpose and goals of their experimenting with COVID-19 and having mice catch and carry the disease? What were they doing with all the bacterial and viral infectious agents found at the illegal lab? Two, are the people that were running and operating this lab Chinese nationals or American citizens? If they're not American citizens, are they here illegally? Three, and most importantly, why wasn't the public informed of this illegal lab and what was found? The Fresno County Department of Public Health, it's public health, has an obligation to notify the public of potential dangers, both past and present. During the COVID pandemic, their medical officer held weekly press conferences justifying ineffective, destructive lockdowns and mandates, and yet not even an acknowledgement to the public of the illegal and potentially dangerous activities at the lab. So he spent a week having the media come, telling the public things that were not true, supporting all of the tyrannical, destructive things that were taking place in our city, our county, our state, our nation, And then when a lab related to COVID-19 is found 5 months ago, no word. No word from him, no word from the Public Health Department, no word from the Board of Supervisors. Number 4, the Board of Supervisors are also silent. This is similar to the crisis when foster children were found to be sleeping on floors in offices. They only addressed it when they were forced to because it became public through the media. This is disgraceful and represents a willful decision to hide from and shirk their duties as elected representatives of, guess what? The public. They're responsible to the public. These same Board of Supervisors were derelict in their responsibilities to the public during the pandemic. They were silent and complicit with all of Governor Newsom's destructive, unscientific lockdowns, mandates, and forcing kids out of school for 2 years. Now we have the same cowardice from the Board of Supervisors, and they're silent again when facing another crisis in the county, again related to COVID. The public has a right to know, what did the Board of Supervisors know about the lab, when did they know it, and why didn't they inform the public? 5, are there any current potential dangers to the public as a result of these experiments and illegal dumping of medical waste that involve COVID-19 and potential infectious agents that are both bacterial and viral in nature? Are there any potential adverse impacts to the farms in the area? How about the people in Fresno County or even beyond the local area? We know COVID spread around the world. How can the public be assured no medical waste was disposed of in our water systems? Number 6, were any safety measures in place at this illegal lab to protect the public from spread of COVID or the infectious agents they were experimenting with? We believe COVID spread from the Wuhan lab, and it could have come from this lab as well. Number 7, Lemoore Naval Air Station is only 45 miles from this illegal lab. As was reported in Substack, quote, all of the F-18s for all the Navy's West Coast-based carriers are located at Lemoore. The F-18s are primary strike fighters for the United States Navy. In a war with China, these are the aircraft that we would rely upon to sink Chinese naval vessels and give us victory, end quote. The implications from the spread of a debilitating virus could be devastating to our nation's military readiness. Is the location of this illegal lab coincidence or purposeful? Now, what do we do with what we've got right now? Well, according to Joe Prado of the Fresno County Department of Health, there's currently no requirements for any lab, licensed or not, to report to the local public health department the biologicals or the testing that is being conducted. I call on the Board of Supervisors to immediately create a new law mandating this requirement in Fresno County, with the penalty of immediate shutdown if the lab is non-compliant. Additionally, there should be financial and criminal penalties for non-compliance. Secondly, Mr. Prado also stated, quote, if you don't receive public funding of any sort, you can, with private dollars, set up a laboratory in California and the United States, end quote, just like was done here. This must change on the state and the national level. There must be enough oversight to protect the public. This clearly isn't the case now, and it must change immediately. And lastly, I don't know when elected officials will learn who they work for. It's for the public. The public has a right to know that after March 3rd, 5 months ago, in a legal lab experimenting with mice with COVID-19 infectious agents, similarly as was done at the Wuhan lab 3 years ago, is going on in our backyard. The public had a right to know. The public has a right to know exactly what they know and when they knew it and what they intend to do about what's going on. Secondly, are there any other labs like this floating around? And what is happening with the people who are involved in this lab? These are the questions that I've been asked by the public. These are the questions that should be answered by the public. And the Fresno Board of Supervisors and the County Public Department of Health, Public Health, has an obligation to let people know what's going on. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Hey, Councilman, so what's the connection between the city of Fresno or your office and all this?
Well, there's no connection other than I represent the public, and the public is asking me, Garry, can you get involved and find out what's going on? And so we've done that. And that's what we've done. They know darn well that I'm their voice, that I always have been a voice for the people. And just like during COVID-19, with all of the tyrannical, authoritarian, unscientific, destructive lockdowns that I opposed, they know where I stand on things. You have to have transparency in government. And it just is lacking. And it's lacking here. And it's unbelievable that we've just gone through COVID for 3 years, where millions of people lost their lives under similar circumstances with people who were experimenting in China, and a virus was unleashed upon the world. Whether it was intentional or not, we don't know. But the fact is, a virus was unleashed on the world in similar ways, experimenting with COVID-19, and then it left that lab and people died.
Are there any labs like that within the city of Fresno?
That is something we'd have to look at. I'm not aware. I mean, this is the first since I heard about this on July 25th when it was reported in the local media paper there in Reedley. It's the first I've heard of any kind of lab like this anywhere. So that's something I'm sure the city of Fresno is going to look at and determine, are any labs like this operating anywhere? And if so, what's going on? Hopefully this was the only one.
How could the city act on that?
I'm sorry?
How could the city act on that?
Act on what?
Trying to find labs within the city.
Well, when you have a business, you're supposed to have a business permit, and people are supposed to provide that business permit and pay for that permit, and that's how the city knows businesses that are operating in the city. Now, if there are labs, as Mr. Prado says, that if they're private, they don't have to register with anybody, that's a problem, and that's a problem on a national and a state level as well as a local level. Did you have a question? Go ahead, whoever. We, the city of Fresno, will certainly be doing our due diligence with this situation, looking at any relationship that occurred in the city with this lab or what they may be trying to do in the future. And the city's going to do that work, I can assure you.
Well, it's been reported that the predecessor to this lab in Reedley operated within the city of Fresno.
Yeah, that's what I read as well, and we're looking into that. And I've spoken to the city manager. I know they're all looking into that on all levels.
Do you know
Yeah.
approximately when the Board of Supervisors would have been briefed on something like this?
No, I don't know. I don't know. But you figure if the county public health department is involved, they're responsible for the oversight there. That's why they're elected to be there. So they had to know at some point, clearly, I would suspect they knew before July 25th when everyone else found out in an article. Yes.
We spoke to the neighbors yesterday. They mentioned nobody, not one department has contacted them and asked absolutely any questions whatsoever. They did say that it was all Chinese-looking people that were working there. Do you know where these people are?
No.
Have they been arrested?
No. Well, that's what I'm saying. The public has a right to know, was this company sponsored by the Chinese government? Who are these people? What is their role in this lab? What was the role of the experimentation with COVID-19 with mice and genetically engineering them to carry the virus? Why is that going on? Why is it going on here? What's the purpose of that? The public has a right to know all of those questions.
Should we be investigating every place that has Chinese people?
Now, this is not about Chinese people. This is about a lab where people are using COVID-19 and infectious agents on mice illegally, dumping it illegally, and apparently they happen to be Chinese nationals. We'll find out whether that's the case or not. But I know you want to inject race into it, but it has nothing to do with this.
Is there a law that states, that protects the departments that are supposed to notify us of what's going on, that they can use as an excuse for not letting us know for 5 months what was going on?
There is no excuse, as far as I'm concerned, for not notifying the public about what's taken place.
Is there a particular person at the county level you hold responsible?
I hold the Board of Supervisors responsible. I hold the Department of Public Health. It is the Department of Public Health. And Dr. Vora had no problem spending every week for the last 2 years during the pandemic spewing misinformation to the public, and yet he's incredibly silent now. So is the Department of Public Health, and so is the Board of Supervisors, but they were silent during COVID the whole time.
Is
Well, the city of Reedley is the one that discovered, and frankly, I want to give kudos to the Reedley Code Enforcement for finding it, for acknowledging it, for seeing it, for investigating it, and frankly, for all the agencies that are now investigating it. That's exactly what needs to happen.
There's word that the building is going to be torn down. Have you heard about that?
I do not know anything. Again, that's Reedley, and so I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do.
So when you're calling for people to be held responsible, what do you mean by that?
Well, you have an illegal lab. You're genetically engineering COVID into mice. For what reason, we don't know. You have a Department of Public Health that becomes aware of this very shortly. It's now been 5 months. The public is not informed of this except from a reporter who reported this in a local media outlet. That's unacceptable to me. It's unacceptable to the people who are calling me. And it should be unacceptable to our constituents, which it is, when you have public officials who are supposed to be representing their interests, and they're not talking about this very dangerous behavior that's going on. If we can't understand that this is dangerous after going through COVID and millions of people dying, I don't know what it's going to take for elected officials to get off their asses and represent the people.
Should somebody lose their job over this?
I'll leave that to the county. I think Dr. Vora should have lost his job long ago. I would have fired him long ago for all of the misinformation he was spewing to the people in Fresno County.
It sounds like this is going to be a campaign issue for supervisor.
Listen, my position of who I am and what I do as a representative for the people is very clear. And my position and the way I conduct myself is very different than most politicians. I'm unafraid. I speak the truth. I don't back down from all of the attacks, and I'll be attacked here too, I'm sure. So they understand that, and that's a very different thing. Whether it happens in a campaign, we shall see.
Have any other local officials contacted you asking for help?
No.
So you're the only one?
Well, I'm the only one today who's been speaking out as far as we know, since July 25th.
So you said the public has been asking you questions.
Yes.
Have you taken those questions to officials yet?
I've taken the questions to the public just like I'm asking right now. These questions need to be answered by officials who are involved in this incident.
So have you taken those questions to the public health?
I'm doing that right today.
I have a question. In all the articles that have been released, because this story is spreading across the nation, in the United States, 30 freezers were full of tissues, right? Where are these tissues coming out of? There was a leaked email out of Fresno Community Hospital, Coast Community Hospital, exposing the increased demise death of these babies after the vaccine rollout. In that same email, it stated that there was a baby missing, and after searching for the baby for a long time, it was found behind urine samples. I find that odd. Were they selling it to these labs? I think there needs to be questions asked and other investigations open in addition.
Okay. Yes, sir.
You listed off a bunch of concerns, including fighter jets near Lemoore. Where are you getting these other concerns that haven't been verified yet?
Well, when you say they haven't been verified, the concern is a verified concern.
It is a verified concern, but you've raised concerns about fighter jets in Lemoore. What does that have to do with this?
Well, if you understand COVID and